I'm going in search of witches.
Witches.
Witches. I guess you found me out, huh? Yeah. You should come around here on Halloween. You'd really see something then.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, we all jump off the roof and fly.
You know, sort of like a coven. You have placed Fester under some strange sexual spell.
At what time will we be spellcasting?
Hey there, witches, and welcome to Moonstone Witchery, the podcast where we chat about witchcraft and spirituality in a modern context. My name is Rian Lockard, and I am the head witch here at Moonstone Witchery. Thank you so much for listening. You can find me on Instagram at moonstone_witchery. You can find me on my website, moonstonewitchery.com. You can find me on my little Facebook group, which is Moonstone Witchery, with the witch with the yellow background on it. We are approaching 1,000 members, I guess, in that group. And even though I forgot to tell the group, I am telling all of y'all now. I'm going to do a fun little giveaway when we get 1,000 members in there. So head on over to there if Facebook is a thing for you. And you can find me here on my podcast talking to you. All right, let's get down to it. So today's episode is about past lives. Now, I think past lives is like one of the most fun topics ever. I love the idea of knowing that I've lived before. I love the idea of imagining what those lives were like. I love the idea of kind of remembering and revisiting moments and glimpses that I've had of those lives in the past or throughout this lifetime. And I will talk to you about that in a few moments. And I just really love the notion that it's not just like one or done, on this lifetime. Because as hard as being here is, and let's be real, OMG, okay? As hard as being here is, it's kind of fun, right? Like, it's kind of like, especially if you think about the fact that like maybe you have multiple chances to do it. And maybe this isn't just your one and only, especially if you think about the fact that like you can be any kind of person in any kind of situation. I just think that's awesome. So as many of you might know, I offer past life readings and past life regressions through my website. A past life reading is where I get to channel from my guides. They just sort of show me like a movie, one of your lives, and I tell you about it. And always, it's always so amazing when I do a past life reading, because the person who I'm speaking to is always like, oh my God, as unexpected as this life probably was, like I can feel it, or I can understand it, or I can see the themes, or yeah, it resonates. Like there's something in me that really gets it. And those moments are really cool for me. And also, it's always interesting for me to be in that energy, to have these lives played for me, and then to share them with someone else, just because it's like I get to viscerally experience it as I'm channeling. And in a regression, when I'm walking someone through their own experience of retrieving their own visceral like memory system of a past life, it's beautiful to bear witness to that and to just hold that space. So I know that for me, a lot of questions come up actually in my business about past lives. Like there's a lot of people that maybe the jury's out for them as to whether they believe in past lives. Maybe, there's a lot of times I get questions about the rules around past lives and all of that stuff. Do they have to be linear? Are they going in order along the timeline? Can you have a past life as an animal? Do you always have to be a human? I am not the authority on this. I really should do this thing. Actually, whenever I'm doing past lives, I always say like, I really should do a few things. One, I really should get brushed up on like history and geography. Because as much as I love history, and you guys, I am like very into history. I love, and I think it's because I have such a vivid past life memory system within myself, but I love history. I love historical fiction. I love like time traveling movies. I love like Outlander, excuse me. Like, you know, and she's like blipping in and out of realities and like stuff in Outlander can be very traumatic to watch. I feel like there needs to be a large blinking trigger warning on that show. For reals. But I just love the idea of all of it. And while I'm not the authority and I do have things to learn, such as history and geography, because I don't know really what countries are where, I also need to let you guys know that like I haven't taken a second to really sit and communicate with my guides. Like everyone has all these fancy questions for me all the time. And I really say to myself, oh, right, I should probably like call a meeting between myself and my guides and sit them down and say, everyone wants to know this or everyone wants to know that, and just kind of interview them so I can get some of these questions answered. And I can and will try to do that at some point. But at this moment, all I can share with you is what I've sort of picked up along the way, what's naturally come up in the course of life through like vis-a-vis conversations with my guides and all of that stuff. So I will share that. But as far as I know, for some of these fancy questions that I get asked, no, your lives don't have to be linear. They don't have to be, starting at year, 5000 BC or whatever it might be and continuing till now, and your next life will be in the future. I have seen people I'm yawning. I have seen people kind of like jumping around in timelines, having a most recent life that was fairly ancient, having a pretty long ago life that was fairly recent. And I think that part of this is because we are not certain, quite honestly, as to what the purpose is, like what the past lives and the current lives are coming together to formulate. I mean, a lot of people like to say that everything has a reason, that we are, learning certain lessons and evolving to a certain place. But I'm not so sure about that. I mean, I know that there are themes. I know that sometimes we incarnate carrying similar archetypes within ourselves. And archetypes are something I'm going to talk to you about in a couple episodes from now. And so in so much as that, my guides have told me, imagine a wagon wheel, and at the center is a circle. And from that circle, these spokes go out and they're holding onto the bigger circle, And so it's one large circle, many spokes attaching to a small circle in the middle. And my guide said to me that your higher self, like your completely ever-present and lifelong, unending, infinite soul is that inner circle. And each spoke goes out into the outer circle, which is a tangible manifestation of that inner soul, right? And they've said to me that these spokes represent different paths, like life paths. And I'm using the word archetypes because, for example, if I carry the archetype of teacher, which is one of the archetypes that I carry, hence this podcast existing, right? If I carry the archetype of teacher, one of those spokes has the word teacher attached to it, or really, honestly, the energy of the archetype called teacher attached to it. And every time I live a life in that teacher archetype where I get to be self-expressive, another layer of that spoke is created. And each spoke is probably a different archetype. And each life contributes to those archetypes until perhaps we fill that wheel and it becomes fulfilled and it becomes self-actualized in some capacity or another. But as far as I can tell, there's no predestination. There's no here's why you're having this life. I personally don't believe in the concept that everything has a reason. And I know sometimes people in spiritual communities have a hard time with that. One of the reasons that I don't believe that everything has a reason is because there are immense atrocities that happen to people in these lifetimes. Just absolutely unacceptable and horrific things. And quite honestly, if we're on the topic of past lives, most of humanity was just absolutely wrecked by tragedies and atrocities and horrors and pain and illness and violence and work and death and poverty and pain and scarcity and harm and a lot of things that were hard. And I don't believe that we are all meant to suffer. So I don't ascribe to the notion that everything happens for a reason. I do believe that we may be able to find reason or purpose or lessons in everything. But that's different, right, than everything happening for a reason. The ability to treasure hunt through the rubble of tragedy to find something positive is a gift. It's a talent. It's a skill. It's an innate, beautiful quality belonging to human beings, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that is the purpose. I think we are all doing the best that we can. And I think that we are all incarnating for a multitude of reasons. And I have loosely asked my guides about this. But I will probably sit down and have a better conversation with them in the days or weeks to come. But the question I've loosely asked them is like, well, what are we all doing though? Right? Like, why are we here? What are we doing? You know, just light, easy kinds of questions. I haven't ever gotten a fully formed answer, but one of the indications I've gotten is so that we can learn to express ourselves, so we can incarnate into a body and allow it to be all the things it's meant to be. Allow it to have access to all of its superpowers and higher truths. Allow it to reach awakening of some kind or another. And also, I've been told that we are actually contributing to the energetic footprint of the universe, at least our section of the universe. And that without predestination, then it means that what we do matters. And if what we do matters, then that means that there are stakes that are malleable at hand, right? Meaning it's not all set out there in the universe, in this tangible version of reality, this tangible dimension that we're in. And we're in this dimension with many other planets and suns and stars. We're here. It's a real place to a degree. Although much like the internet, it both does and does not exist, right? This tangible world that we're in. But what I'm saying is, like, if we're incarnating and we have free will and things are not preordained or predestined, then the way we live our lives actually makes a difference. We're actually shaping something. And I asked my guides a while ago, are people incarnating quickly? Are people taking breaks? Like, what's happening? And I was told, well, right now, people are tending to incarnate rather quickly, especially the old veterans who are used to incarnating and kind of have an open and available channel so that they can recollect the other side and know that what they're doing is to be here to like activate a certain incarnation, a certain body, a certain person into becoming who they're supposed to be. Because what we're doing is we're contributing positive energy, or we're contributing spiritually enlightened energy or spiritually uplifted energy, or really the energy of healed human beings. human beings who are willing to be born and to learn and then to unlearn all the things that they were told that prevented them from being who they were, and then to live from a place of authenticity. See, I think that's what we're doing here. And if that's what we're doing here, then we are shaping the positive energy of the whole universe, that healed energy, and we're helping the universe get organized. But I digress. So, past lives. I really do believe that we can have as many lives as we'd like to have. I really do believe that the amnesia is real, like when we transition and after we've been granted this period of time with which we may remain like a soul who is loosely very much still like the human version of ourselves. Because there is a degree of that, right? Because it's like when we pass away, or when we've had someone pass away, we've all been visited by our relatives or loved ones who have sent us signs of some kind or another. And they are still showing up in the energy footprint of their human self. So there is a part of us that gets to stay or blip into that energy again and again to comfort our loved ones. But after that phase is over and we return to the formless, just like endless sea of unconditional love that I think is out there waiting for us, that I can remember swimming in before I was born. If we return back to there, I think that we're allowed to choose to incarnate when we wish to, or sometimes we're invited to, or sometimes we're asked to come in and play a certain role because that energy is needed. And sometimes we're just showing up for fun. And I do believe we can incarnate in other forms as other creatures or as other beings or as other entities entirely. I have done past life readings where people have asked me about lives as interplanetary creatures or fae folk or animals. My own son remembered a life in which we were birds before he was born. He shared this memory with me when he was very young. And so I think that the opportunities and the options are endless. And I know that there's maybe not so much of a structure or a rule system that we are used to in our human form. Because as humans, we like things to be organized a certain way and to make a certain amount of sense, right? So we're like, what are the rules to past lives? Like, what's the timeline? Do you have to wait X amount of years before you can incarnate again? Do you have to go linearly? Like, if you're on one path, you stay on that path. Like, and I just am like, I don't know. I mean, I do and I don't know. I've been told certain things, but at the same time, I want to say, like, I don't think that our human rules really necessarily fit into the structure of the infinite realm of just unconditional love and possibilities. And yet, at the same time, from doing readings, I do know that there are some commonalities. Now, one commonality is, and I hate to break this to y'all, but most of us were not Cleopatra. Most of us were not, Queen Elizabeth I. Most of us were not these amazing, famous, scholarly, or impressive, well-known people from throughout history. The truth is that it took many hundreds of thousands of enslaved people or peasant people or impoverished people or whatever the case may be to create this structure of the world in which we live right now. It took many millions of people having lives of just hardship and work for this world to even exist. And so many of us have many lives that perhaps didn't fulfill some ultimate historical purpose, except that they did, Because without those lives, this world, as we know it, wouldn't actually really exist, right? And so in that way, every life is very meaningful. Even the lives that as you live them, they might feel meaningless. A pile of rocks is not the same pile if you take away a couple of those rocks. And therefore we know that everything matters, but also we can see how that we have all had many lives that have perhaps just been hard work and pain. And so sometimes those lives rise to the surface in readings with me. And I have clients that say, well, what is the point in me knowing that? And I say sometimes, perhaps it is valuable to know that we can have a whole life that ultimately perhaps seems like, what was the point, in question marks or quotation marks? And yet there was a point, right? And it can ease and soothe our minds a little bit when we have days like that. Because now we live in this hyper-capitalist, hyper-productive, hyper-technologically advanced culture that says every single minute of every single day should be productive in some capacity or another, or you are failing. And yet, the medieval peasants slept through most of the winter. And yet, entire lives were spent pushing rocks from one place to another. And yet, entire existences were splayed out by moving sheep or tilling fields or simply trying to get your children fed amidst the hustle and bustle of a very busy, very dangerous, very unsanitary early civilization world. And all of these lives still have matter, and they still have value, and they still have meaning. Now, occasionally, you will have a memory of a past life, and you might not even realize you're doing it. This is one of my favorite things about past lives, is that we can remember. We just sometimes don't realize. And this is a truth that's very difficult for me to explain to people, especially with other intuitive gifts, because what I'm asking you to do is to be so aware of your awareness, so aware of your consciousness that you are really watching what's happening, and that can be hard. Now, I want you to ask yourselves, when you daydream, or when your mind just sort of drifts off, or when your eyes get that soft focus and you're just kind of sitting there floating around within your own mind, but you're present in the world, you're awake, but you're at a meeting, or you're on the phone, or you're like watching a movie that has lost your interest for a moment, so you've zoned out. What are you thinking of? What are you seeing? Sometimes we don't even realize that we're doing many things at once in that state, that drifting state. Sometimes in that drifting state, we're thinking about our to-do list, or we're planning a conversation with someone, or we're wondering about a thing. And simultaneously, there's a scene that we're watching in front of our own eyes, but it's kind of just in the background of our thoughts, which are really just distractions from what we're actually doing in tangible reality. And in this way, you can see how layered already your conscious and unconscious are at all times. Because one of the amazing things about being a human, and this is what we start to see, really see and know when we get hyper aware of our awareness, is that we are always doing many things at once. Our consciousness and our unconsciousness and our subconsciousness are all floating around on top of each other all the time. And we don't even really know it. And yet when I say, okay, pay super attention now, when you zone out and you make your to-do list, or you think about, how you're going to coax your child into doing whatever you're asking them to do later, or you wonder if you're going to get enough hours of sleep, or what should you wear tomorrow, or what should you talk about in whatever the meeting is, or whatever's going on. I also want you to say, what am I watching though in my mind's eye? What's the background story? What's another world that I slip into? Or when my to-do list stops and I start to just zone deeper into my zone out, what am I seeing? Or another version of this is, when I close my eyes and I try to meditate, what do I see first? And I don't mean if you're having a guided meditation. I really mean if you're closing your eyes and you're consciously trying to clear your mind, what do you see? Sometimes we're taught to go to a certain safe space in our meditation places. Have you really studied that place? Or sometimes we just default somewhere. Have you ever stopped to notice where it is? Because a lot of the times, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is when we are watching that unfold in front of us, we are typically seeing a place that was very important to us in a previous life. These past life memories float to the surface of our consciousness in this way. It happens all the time, and we don't notice it. We don't notice what we're watching. We don't notice what we're thinking. We don't notice these familiar places that we're always seeing, that are always around us. We don't notice. But once we do notice, we can start to watch them like they're real, like they're on a movie screen or a projector in front of ourselves. And so I want you to begin to be aware of this. What blips in front of your face from time to time? What familiar imagined places do you know? One of mine is the secret cave behind a waterfall. Another is the banks of a river. Another is the top of a mountain that overlooks a beautiful sea. I have so many, but I've really highly trained myself to notice them. I have so many, and I realize these are familiar places from familiar times, from familiar lives that I have lived. And when I've allowed myself to trust myself and to know that that's what they are and to dip into them, it's been miraculous. The depth of knowing and the depth of consciousness that I actually still maintain from these experiences is almost overwhelming, but it's so beautiful and profound. And it is so validating for who I am today, because I have so many of these memories, these recollections, these impulses, these familiar senses that rise up within me simply because I was willing to look at what I was already looking at in my mind's eye. Now, this manifests in another very interesting way. I want you to begin to monitor your sexual fantasies. And I know that sounds kind of out of left field, but our fantasies, especially if they automatically, if we have an obvious historical, spin on our fantasies, they're very often past life related. The power of those sexual moments that go back through time, because they are so highly charged, highly intense, highly connected, they imprint themselves on our spiritual self. And so they will rise to the surface, because that is a human experience that has not changed over the course of millennia. That sexual energy is a common thread. It's our creative energy. It's our empowerment. It's our sacral chakra, but it is also our connection to all of our previous selves. It is our birth story. And because of that, we can recollect our previous lives through these sexual moments, these sexual fantasies, these connections that we have. It's a way to go back and to see, oh my gosh, yes, that was an experience I had in that lifetime. But first you must be willing to look at it and to trust yourself and to not second guess that these are real memories, and that can be really hard. And so as with all things, whenever we're trying to develop our intuitive connection, we must get out of our own way, and we must be willing to be on our own side, and we must be willing to say, what if it's true? What if I can trust myself? What if I can believe myself? What if this is how my higher self communicates with me? What if it's true? What if these fantasies or these memories or these impulses or these visions are actually my past life memories? Because what harm does it do to believe yourself? Why not? It's not like anybody's going to roll up on you and be like, hey, I'm the past life police. And this was like, you're not remembering it right. Who would remember it better than you? And especially, what state would launch you there more so than the amazing, empowered state of like sexual ecstasy? Of course, you're going to get sent to like some other world. And if it's not working like that for you with a partner, try that by yourself and send yourself somewhere, because it works. And because that's a really great way to connect to those previous versions of yourself through that same energy portal. I'm serious. Ask yourself what you see. Ask yourself what you know. Ask yourself what you've always seen. When we start to see what we've always seen, we start to know so much more than we realize we knew. And if that doesn't sound like a crazy riddle, like one of those those ancient unsolvable answers that we're all supposed to meditate upon to to achieve enlightenment, they're called koans. If it doesn't sound like one of those, I don't know what does. But really, if you can start to see what you've always seen, you're going to start to know so much more than you realize. Because this is how you meet your guides as well. For everybody who's always asking me, what do my guides look like? What are their names? How can I see them? How can I meet them? Who do you look at when you close your eyes at night? Your guides are almost always standing there. You're almost always seeing them when you begin to pray. Who are you talking to? What do they look like? You might not realize it, but you've been looking at them your whole life. Sometimes it's hard to see what we are already seeing because it's so a part of us that we don't realize that we're looking at it. Don't be hard on yourself if you struggle with this, or if you're listening to me and you're saying, what are you even talking about? Just practice with it. The more you meditate, the more advanced you get. That's just a common truth that we all know. The more you meditate, the more you're able to start to see what you're already seeing. I really mean that. And I wish I could say that in a different way that makes it more accessible, but that's the best way to say it. There's some other ways to discover what your past lives might have been as well. Number one, who do you recognize in your own current life? Like, have you ever had this experience where you've just laid eyes upon someone and you've recognized them immediately? I have a very intense past life recognition story that I won't go into the whole details of it. But once I was working at a spiritual community, and it was my job to greet the person who was going to be speaking that day. And so I was cleaning up and I was doing things. And when he arrived, I turned and I looked at him, and everything in me just shut down. I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want anything to do with him. And I was polite and I said hello and I asked him what he needed, but he had a very interesting visceral reaction to me as well. And we were awkwardly standing near each other, both in our own interesting vibration. And someone came in and they looked at us and they just said, "Are you two married?" And we both said, "Oh, no. Nope." And it disturbed us both. It was like a touchy subject, even though this was the first time we had ever just met. And as he spoke, I suddenly remembered my guides told me, I said to them, "What is my problem with this man?" Because it was unusual for me. Because I'm usually very friendly and I can find common ground and talk to anybody. And I was like, what is up with me? And they said, "He's from your past life." And they showed me which past life he was from. And it's one that I've been able to remember for most of this life. And suddenly I was like, oh. Because see, it hadn't gone well between me and him. we had had a very interesting romantic relationship that just didn't end well. And this story gets so complicated, and there's so many twists and turns. And I'm actually writing this story in my book right now, so I'm not going to share the whole thing. But I will say that this story, it goes like this. So he stood there and he spoke about whatever his topic was, and I was enthralled by him, even though everything in me was also like, no, we're still mad at him. Apparently, I can hold a grudge for multiple lifetimes, but I watched him, and the whole time he spoke, he was looking right at me. Like he would try to look at other people, and he wouldn't be able to. His eyes would come back to mine. And I was talking to my guides, and I said, I remember this life. And actually, I know who he was. That's a whole other part of the story. Like, I knew his actual name, and there's like historical documentation of his existence. And I said to myself, am I supposed to tell him this? And they said, just let it be. And I said, if he approaches me and asks me, I will tell him that we had a previous life together, but he would have to approach me. And I assumed that the odds of that happening were slim to none, considering how awkward our introduction was and how he couldn't seem to take his eyes off of me. And yet I would watch him drag his eyes away from me, almost like he was frustrated that he couldn't seem to take his eyes off of me. And so I was just waiting for this to get over with. I needed to just leave and get out of there. There was too much happening. And at the end, typically the speakers get really approached at the spiritual community by everyone who would just listen to them speak, because they stick around and they make themselves available. It's really nice. And so I was expecting him to be swamped by people, and I said, I'm just going to duck out then. But before I could, he approached me and he said, I'm really sorry. And this is a really weird thing for me to say. And he goes, I can't take my eyes off of you. Do you know why that's happening to me? Now, first of all, how profound is this so far? For him to have enough self-awareness and then enough curiosity and then the balls, excuse my language, really, to approach someone and say, why am I staring at you? As if he knew that I would know the answer. See, he had such a deep level of self-trust that I was kind of floored. I mean, I wasn't surprised because I had said to my guides, you know, if he comes up to me, I'll tell him. Meanwhile, I'm over here thinking it's never going to happen, so I'm off the hook. And here he was standing in front of me. And he goes, why am I unable to take my eyes off of you? And typical me being me, I said, well, I am really hot. And I said it tongue in cheek, y'all. I was laughing. I'm joking. I'm trying to diffuse this intense energy with a joke because that's what I do. And he was like, yeah, sure. But like, what's going on? Right? Like, he was not in it for my humor. And I said, yeah, okay. It's because we had a past life together. And I have no idea how you knew that I would know that, but I do. And he said, wow, that makes so much sense. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, do you remember the life? I said, yes. And he said, was I good to you? And I said, no, not really in the end. And he said, well, I am so sorry. And I hope that in this life, if we continue to know each other, I will be better. And I was stunned. I was speechless. I had chills and I felt like crying because, you know, there are people from this lifetime that I would love an apology from, right? And here I am getting an apology like a millennia later from this beautiful man who just trusted and knew that there was something between us that needed some type of resolution. And I said, thank you. All is well, all is forgiven. And I meant it. And we parted ways. And from there I have later, and this will probably be in my book too, but I've later told him the story of who he was and shown him a portrait that was painted of him at the time. And I've told him more about it, and we've become friends. It's an interesting friendship. We don't talk very often, but when we do, we have these amazing conversations, and then we just part ways and do our own thing. But this is the power of trust. This is the power of believing yourself. This is the power of exploring yourself with this profound sense of curiosity. Curiosity with a willingness to believe what you see. Curiosity where you are on your own side. Instead of seeking to diminish yourself or dismantle yourself, what if you explored yourself with curiosity? And then you believed yourself and you took your side and you trusted yourself. Imagine what is possible. And I'll tell you that I am living proof of what is possible when you do that. You get to have experiences like the one that I just told you about. Because there were so many times right in that story that I could have put the brakes on and just acted like a quote normal person and not believed myself or shoved down my impulses or not questioned myself or turned away and not met his gaze or made up something instead of telling him the truth. But I chose to trust, and you can too. And so did he. And look at what happened. It's amazing. To me, at least. If you ever recognize a person, just that quick recognition, whether good or bad, it's often a past life connection. The first time I walked into my English class, my freshman year of college, there was a girl sitting there and everything in me just melted because I knew her. I just knew her. And she knew me too. And it was nice. It's happened to me several times. And every time it happens, I get so excited because I'm like, yes, somebody familiar. And often they're not necessarily some huge part of my life in this lifetime. But isn't it nice to know that there are familiar souls circulating around us? Doesn't it make it a little less lonely and scary? Isn't it nice to know that somehow someone familiar can just pop up out of the blue? And it doesn't have to mean some big thing. It can just be a nice moment. I also want you to look to your interests, maybe your hobbies. What geographic locations have you always been into? What historical time periods have you always been interested in? When I was like 5, I would sing these very classic Civil War songs to myself all the time. I've always had this obsession with the French Revolution and France in general during that time period. I think I've had many lives during that time period, all overlapping. And yes, my guides have told me that you can be incarnated in different lifetimes at the same time period. Now, that'll go ahead and mess with your very linear human mind, but it's true, or it's what I've been told, and I choose to believe it. There is something to be said for believing your inner knowing. And I don't know why, but I'm being prompted to share this. The other day I had a reading with a client, and everything in the reading was saying, you have some stuff to heal with your mother. I actually do this thing where I scan someone's energy before the call, and I look at their photo and I tell them all about themselves. And before the call, I found out like she has a lot of healing to do with her mother. And so I told her on the call, you have a lot to heal with your mother. And at the time she clapped back at me and she said, no, I'm fine there. That's not right. Now, I don't really get told that's not right when I read very often, if at all. That might have been one of the only times I can remember, actually. And I said, okay. And then I read her energy again, and it still was there. So then I asked my guides, like, does she have healing with her mother? And they said, oh, absolutely. And I said back to her, I'm going to go ahead and disagree with you that I'm wrong. And I said, I really believe there's something there to heal with your mother. And we kept going and we talked about something else. And then towards the end of the call, she said to me, You're right, by the way. I do have a lot to heal with my mother. She abandoned me when I was little, and she was in and out of my life, and she's never made me feel like I was loved, and I've always felt alone. And I have so much to heal that I just don't even want to look at it. And I said, that's okay. You don't have to look at it. And thank you for letting me know. And she said, well, you came back at me and told me that you were going to trust your guides instead of me. And I felt like I didn't want you to believe that you were wrong or to have any doubt, because I knew that you were right. I just didn't want to talk about it. And that's fair. You don't ever have to talk about anything that you don't want to talk about, whether with me or with anybody else. But what I liked there in that story is a couple things. One, I will do this from time to time when I am in a reading, especially if I'm doing a medium reading where I am clearly being shown something and my client doesn't know what I'm talking about. I will say, I'm sorry, but I'm going to defer to the person who I'm speaking to on the other side rather than you. I believe them, not you. But I will always believe my guides over anybody else as well. And that is risky. Can you imagine the audacity that I have to say to someone, is this true for you? And for them to say no. And for me to go, sorry, but I think it is. It's kind of gross, right? It's like gaslighting, right? I'm like not, but I only behave this way in the context of a formal reading in which people have agreed to come in to hear what their guides are saying. And my job is to just get out of my own way and to believe my guides. But what if you believed yourself to that level? Could you imagine? That's why I shared that story. Now look to the historical periods of time that you're interested in. Look to the music that you're drawn to. Look to the geographical locations that feel fascinating to you. Look at your scars and ask those scars where they came from in a previous life, especially your birthmarks. Ask your soul to just show you, right? What could go wrong? Ask your soul to just show up and tell you a story from a past life. Pay attention to what you see when you daydream. These are all ways that we can connect. These are all ways that we can know. Ask yourself who you know you've had a previous life with. Ask yourself what it was about. Believe yourself. Why not? Say, what if it's possible? Because that question, what if it's possible, makes room. It makes room for it to maybe be possible. It makes room for it to be wrong too, but it makes room for it to maybe be possible. But we've all had many lives. We've all done this dance before. And some of our lives are in the future, and some of our lives are in the past, and some of our lives are concurrent with our current life. And it's a miracle and it's amazing. And what if it's true? And what if it's possible? What are the lives that you've had? What are the times that you've lived in? Can you allow yourself to be familiar with a certain time and place and to take in all the current media? Read historical novels about that time and place. Watch movies or shows set there. Travel when the world opens up. There's something that happens to us when we step on the land that used to belong to us in a previous life. Go to those places. What is healed within you? Imagine if you allowed yourself to lean into this knowing rather than to lean away from it. Wouldn't that be incredible? And isn't that possible right at our fingertips? Allow yourself to know what you know and to believe what you believe. And I'll leave you with this one last exercise that I love to give to people. If we have had many lives on this planet, that means that the bones of our previous bodies are buried in this earth. Your own bones are somewhere on this planet. And that is both a very freaky and very amazing thing to think about at the same time. And yes, to those of you who are saying, well, what if we were cremated or whatever, of course. But in some regard, most likely, your bones are in the soil of this earth somewhere. And so here's an exercise to do. I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to slip into a meditation state. And I want you to watch yourself turn into a magnet, an energy magnet. And I want you to beckon forth all of the positive lessons, all of the learning, all of the energy that you need that will support you and help you and be in alignment with your highest good and your ultimate healing. I want you to call in the energy that fits that criteria from those bones. Turning yourself into that energy magnet, suck that energy from those bones to yourself and allow yourself to heal and to know and to remember and to be uplifted. Allow that wisdom to fill you and to open your eyes. What would happen if that was possible? Because it is. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I am struggling with my voice this week, so I hope that wasn't too distracting. If you want, I want you to find me on my website, moonstonewitchery.com. I am very booked right now with readings and with coaching and with all of that good stuff. But you are always able to purchase products from me. I have enchanted skeleton keys. I have crystals. I have enchanted jewelry. I have spells for hire. And if you do want a reading or if you are interested in coaching with me, I do have past life readings. I do have past life regressions. You may have to wait a couple weeks, but I would love to work with you. So you can always find me, moonstonewitchery.com, or on Instagram at moonstone_witchery, or come join us in our little Facebook group where at 1,000 members, I will be giving something witchy and fantastic away. So thank you for listening. And if you enjoy my podcast, please do share it with others, because nothing warms my heart more than finding out that my words are resonating and are supporting you. I really love that. And I love that you guys are sharing it. And I just always appreciate hearing from you. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. I'll talk to you soon.